Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another segment of Coder's Corner. Joining me, as always, is our resident programming guru, Hector. Hector, hello.
Hello, hello.
So, what tips do you have for us today?
So today we've got two kind of shorter ones again. The first tip is the %sysfunc macro function, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with. They'll probably have stumbled across it trying to find solutions to sort of kind of weird problems that they've got or things that they want to do where it's not obvious how you do it, especially with macro variables. And this is just to kind of highlight just how powerful this function is. At a top level, it basically gives you access to all of the functions that you know and love in data steps, and gives you access to them for macro variables. So on our Coders Corner database, the example that we give is using a translate on just a macro variable to pick out part of the string and just replace it with something else. I would say best way again to kind of find out what it can do is to Google and get to the SAS documentation. There is actually also a good paper that we've got a link to on our database, which is called %sysfunc, a macro variable can't function without it. It's by Chris Moriak from AstraZeneca. And I think it just does a really good job of explaining a few things that you might not realize as well. For instance, when you look at examples with %sysfunc, a lot of them use DSID and RC as macro variable names, and it's kind of like gives the impression that these are special in some way, but they're actually not. You don't have to use RC or DSID for your example if it doesn't make sense to you. I think it says in the paper it's because RC apparently stands for return code, as SYSFUNC always returns some kind of value. And the examples will be for kind of opening and closing data sets, and then DSID is just the value that it returns when it opens a data set. So yeah, that's the first tip. I'd say just go and check it out, see what it can do.
That's a very useful tip. I've personally have used it for when you're calculating big ends or small ends, getting a macro variable for that, and then using the sys function when creating a label to kind of strip all the extra spaces and stuff like that. So then my label looks beautiful. So yeah, that's just one example of where you could use this very useful function. So thank you for explaining that one, Hector. What else do you have for us?
Cool. So the second one is the modifiers in the compress function, which don't think many people would know sort of after going through our graduate training program, but it's actually really, really useful to know this. So the basic compress function, what it does is it just removes spaces from a string. Probably use this in TFL QC. So we would typically compress all strings in TFLs because they've been set up on the production side to align the values properly. We would compress this so the QC programmer doesn't have to do that. They can just check it visually. So the idea of the modifiers is that by default, it's removing spaces from a string, but you can change that. So you can add in certain sets of characters that it will remove. And then the most useful one is probably the K modifier, which is to keep. So instead of removing all of these characters, it keeps them. The classic example is if you've got a string that's got some numerical value in it. So say you've got visits and it's like week 1, week 2, week 3. You wanted to just get a numeric value, which was the number. So say you could put it into like a do loop or something. You can use compress, put your visit in, and then you can use D, which is for decimals. So you're telling it that your list of characters is just decimals. You don't care about spaces. And then you do D and then you do K. So that will just keep the number that's in your visit. And then you can push that into an input and just read it as a number. So that's like the classic use case of keep, I would say. Another quite neat feature is that you can also set it to remove non-printable characters and like certain special characters that you might have in your data that you really don't want because they're causing issues, like when you try and write out to a PDF or something. So you can sort of in one fell swoop just get rid of any funky characters that you don't want. Once again, I'd say go to the SAS documentation because most of it is pretty good, and you'll get a good idea of what you can do.
Yeah, no, compressor is definitely something I've used. I stumbled across it, I think, probably a year or two ago, and it's quite a lot of things you can do with it. And I think I used it especially to sort of remove the greater and less than symbols, or like at least identify them. Very useful when, yes, exactly. It was an ADLB I was programming, and that function was, it was beautiful when I found that. So Hector, thanks again for sharing two wonderful tips. And thank you all very much for listening. And as always, please head over to our Instagram page at We Are Veramed, and you'll be able to see a sort of visual representation and some examples of the 2 tips Hector gave today. Hector, thanks again very much for joining me, and I'll speak to you next time.
Thank you.